Chapter 8. The political situation changed in 1988. A law was passed bringing in general freedom of religion in China. The official church, the Three Self-Patriotic Movement, self-determination, self-support, self-propagation, was promoted by the state. No money was paid, but the authorities urged the Christians to join it. That way they could live out their faith unhindered in China. These official churches with their freely accessible services were easier for the authorities to control, but those who didn't submit to the dictates of the state set themselves up in opposition to the law. Many of the house churches did not trust the state and didn't link up with the Three Self Church. My father was one of those asked to cooperate with the representatives of the Three Self Churches, but he would have none of it. Being that close to the state was so repugnant to him that it was a step he just couldn't take. Following the massacre at the Gate of Heavenly Peace in Beijing on the 4th of June 1989, also known as the Tiananmen Massacre, the government decided in May 1991 to take a harder line with the many house churches that had sprung up all over the country. Although a law had been passed to dissolve the house churches, they'd been growing even more thanks to the work of traveling preachers, and through the direct intervention of miracles from God. The leaders of the house churches were trying to make contact with overseas Christians, an action that was punishable as counter-revolutionary by the communist government. Yet the movement could no longer be checked by the state, not even by means of arrests and cruel persecution. So we carried on meeting in our village for prayer and church services. The greater the pressure became, the more people accepted the gospel. Even some communist leaders joined our community and made no secret of the fact that they had found a new and joyful way of life. In our village, we had a fairly good relationship with the political leaders. They knew that we Christians were not about to overrun the state, and they also noticed that we worked hard, looked after the underprivileged, and were developing a sense of concern for the protection of the environment as well. The common view in party circles was that nothing better could happen to the Chinese state than for many to become Christians and lead a responsible life. But of course no one could admit this because it would have called into question the fundamentals of the communist ethos. During this time, my father was let out of prison, subject to certain conditions, such as that he must always report to the local police when he wanted to leave the village. At the beginning, he did indeed do this, but eventually he started going off traveling again for days without reporting and asking for permission, until they arrested him again. One of the things he set up secretly with some friends was proper training for the leaders of local house churches. He was indefatigable in his travels. He spared neither himself nor his family and allowed himself no rest. So in the end, it was God himself who put the brakes on, as my father said to me, and he was sent to the notorious labor camp at Danan. My father had been accused of unauthorized assembly and planning an uprising because he had been meeting foreigners. It wasn't clear to me at the time how my father managed to harmonize this imprisonment with God's will. Over and over again I asked myself, why would God let this happen?